Hi.
Start my video. There I am.
How's it going?
It's all right. This is fun. Thanks for doing this.
Yay. Yeah, we're really excited about what we're going to cover this week. I mean, we've been working on it for a long while and now it's like fruition. So it's really exciting. And we've gotten a lot of really good feedback so far. So
awesome. Good.
We're going to have Jason coming in. Jason, day 2. Hey, you are muted, but you don't have to talk yet. Jason just finished working on his house and he posted pictures yesterday and it looks phenomenal. So you can now see some of his decor back there. Nice.
It's awesome.
All right, so we're gonna have probably more people joining us, hopefully. And so I'm just gonna jump right in and just ask if you guys have any questions. But before we do that, I'll just introduce myself and Megan to you guys. I know you probably know who we are, but so I'm Summer. I've been an assistant for almost 10 years, and we created the Time Rich because we realized that a lot of the hardest parts about hiring a virtual assistant is just overcoming the overwhelm that comes with looking at that hiring process and with actually onboarding them. So that's something that we created because Megan is also hiring a virtual assistant for her company that she's working with. We're going to have Glenn join us. And Megan is a lot behind the scenes, and you're going to see her on day 4 as well in the video lesson. And so she is kind of doing a lot of the technical stuff and making sure that things happen. So we forgot to introduce ourselves yesterday during the call, so I thought maybe that would be important now that you have like a face to us. And then, so yesterday, just a little recap, was about getting real, understanding how you're spending your time, and then what a virtual assistant can do for you. And then 2 of our people were already on the call yesterday, but we had a lot of really good questions coming in about what tools to use, how many VAs to hire for projects, what the budget looks like, what the priorities should be, and a bunch more. So if I know that you didn't get that call, Melissa, but it is on the lesson page. So I recommend that you just check that out. And then today is really great because it's about understanding how much time you can generate with outsourcing, and not only outsourcing, but eliminating those tasks that are taking a lot of your time. And then what you'll do with that newfound time wealth. And then actually going through and checkboxing your preferences for a virtual assistant, which can be really overwhelming if you're just looking through a bunch of different websites. But I think this kind of simplifies it, how much you want to pay, what location, what preferences you specifically have. And so by the end of this call, we want you to be really clear about what you're looking for in the virtual assistant, what tasks you can hand out, and we want you to be really excited about hiring your VA. Okay, that being said, I'll open the floor. Does anybody have any questions about lesson 2? No one?
Okay, is everybody going to be silent? I'm not known to be the silent type, so I think I'll just jump right in. I was looking at your sheet for today, and I noticed you had listed both virtual and in-person on here. I didn't know that you were going to cover that, but that's okay. So yes, let's start with that. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so it's not really something we go in depth with for sure, because this is about virtual assisting a lot, most of it, but it is about your time most of all. And so if you do have a preference for somebody coming in and working as like a personal assistant for you, we want you to identify that as your preference. But the websites that we're going to cover do like really specify for virtual assisting, but we just wanted you to be able to identify whether that was like a major factor with your choice or not.
Not really. It was just one of the things on my list. I had complete some inventories of some products and stuff, which you can't do virtually.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless so I snap pictures and say, count these, please.
Yeah.
But, so I just saw that on there. I just thought I'd ask that question. So
yeah, I've been an in-person assistant before, and so there's some specific tasks that so it's really about seeing what your primary tasks are, and if that happens to be only for in-person stuff, then I would recommend that you switch your gears and go towards that. But yeah, this is going to cover. And Megan,
okay. And as we get into the rest of it here, I also didn't mark my selections for agency versus individual or employment type of 1099 employee or no preference. Are you going to talk about that today or later in the week?
I can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I never really thought about it that way. I was envisioning a complete outsource. I was just going to go to a website, pick a
Yep.
person, give them my tasks. I would pay the website and they would pay them, that kind of stuff is what
Yeah.
I was thinking. But I never really thought about these other options. So are there pros to doing some of these other things or not? It was basically what I'd be looking for.
Okay. So Megan, did you have something to touch base on with the last question before we move to this one?
Yeah, I did. So can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as far as the checkbox you were talking about with virtual and local or either or, that is a good example of what it is that I do for my other company. I work with a music therapy private practice based out of Peoria.
Mm-hmm.
And I work mostly virtual, but every 2 weeks or every month, I'll physically go to the location. We'll have, in-person meetings with them and, talk with potential investors and go to school board meetings and do things like that. So for me, at my other job, it's more of that middle checkbox of I do mostly virtual work, but I also go in and, I can count the inventory or something like that as well.
And with that one, I'll just also side note that one is usually an individual that you would hire, right? So you can find agencies like I think Care.com has some personal assistants that are local. There's a couple different ways to do that. But as far as I know, the easiest way to do it is literally to find an individual that's in your area instead of going through necessarily like a VA or a agency that does that. So to kind of go to your next question, the individual versus the agency, that's a really good question because an individual is someone that you specifically look for, right? Like, so I am working as, under my SummerSlevin LLC, right? So if a client comes to hire me, I have a 1099 LLC. And so that adds extra protection. Like my main client, she doesn't hire anybody without an LLC because she doesn't want them to look like an employee at a certain point. Like if they only have one client, you are at risk for them saying that you are their employer. And so that's a little bit different, right? Like even if it's a 1099 where you're not like making them an employee, you are at risk for them saying this is my employer, and then you have to pay the taxes on being an employer versus hiring a freelancer. And then as a little side note on that, most of the places that we're going to recommend, they're going to assign someone to you, and most of them you'll actually pay the company. So what you're saying is often the case, but there are times where they'll actually, like a marketplace, will send you an individual, and you will literally now have a contract with that individual. So that does happen sometimes. And that's really the difference between the agency is an agency will like have either a place where you can scroll through the VAs, or they'll have a place so FreeUp will have you scroll through different VAs, or they'll have you send in your preferences, which is what I think you're more familiar with. You send in your preferences and then they say, hey, this looks like a really good candidate for you.
Okay.
So that's the agency, yeah.
You had mentioned Care.com. I used them when I was hiring babysitters and summer daycare for my son. I didn't know they did VA stuff. I kind of ignore their emails nowadays because he's older. But
one of my old clients, I moved 2 hours away and wasn't able to assist her as much. And she's like, I don't know what to do. So she went on Care and got assistance. But I didn't like their accounting, but paying them I hated that as a customer. I hated the way the pay system works. So I don't have any personal experience with it, but that's how I know of them. Cool. Okay. Did I answer your questions with that?
You did.
Cool. All right. Excellent. Melissa, do you have any questions? Because you haven't been on the Q&A yesterday, so I didn't know if you had any questions from either yesterday or today.
I watched the Q&A earlier. I think I'm still in absorption mode. I'm processing. As we continue to talk, something may come to mind.
Totally. Yeah. No pressure on that. No pressure at all. And so did anybody have any questions about not only your preferences, but how you were spending your time and what you could eliminate versus what you could outsource? And did anybody have any trouble? I thought that maybe one of the questions that would come up was, how do I estimate how many hours it's going to take? And so did anybody have any questions like that? Or are you pretty familiar with how long everything's going to take within your tasks?
Well, I know how long it'll take me. I don't know how long it's going to take somebody else. So I may need help there. But I was looking at your tiers because we touched on this a little bit yesterday. I was trying to group by percentage. Most of my tasks, I think I can stick into the general VA. But like you mentioned with PowerPoint, I say, make sure you can hear me okay. Some of it might be slightly specialized, but those are one-offs. So I guess if I'm going to hire someone on a weekly basis, I would give them most of my general stuff, but I may have to periodically hire a specialized person or an expert, and I would just follow the same process, I would assume.
Exactly. And what is great about that is that if you're already aware that that's a possibility, then you can choose an agency based on having both.
Okay.
So you could say, and so that you're not starting over. So you could say, all right, I want to hire a general virtual assistant, but eventually I want somebody that can specialize in creating content for me, right? So when I hire that agency, or when I discuss that with the agency, I'll say, maybe eventually I want this. And then later you can say, hey, like, do you have anybody that you can recommend for me? And you would go through the same agency, which is really a nice way to do it. And a lot of them will allow you to have multiple assistants through that one agency.
Okay.
And we cover that tomorrow as well. So, yeah.
Okay. Last question. That's immediate question. That is, I have to qualify that. Experience. I didn't know if I should mark the no preference or 0 years. Some of the general stuff to get my feet wet that I think just about anybody can handle. I probably don't care if they have no experience or not, but should I care is the question I want to ask you. Should I get an experienced person that has at least a year's worth of experience with some type of a resume, or can you give a new person a shot?
I mean, that really depends on how well you're communicating the tasks and how well you've processed them. But also keep in mind that most agencies don't cover or don't hire someone that is just starting out. Like, a lot of agencies will require them to already have experience. And so you could mark no preference, and then when you're talking to the agency, you could get more clear about it. That's kind of why we gave that option too. It's like, if I'm not sure, I'll just mark no preference. And then once I actually am talking to the agency, if they say like, we've got a newbie that just walked in, like, I think that he could probably handle all your PowerPoints, like, you get to decide at that point whether or not you want to hand that task off.
Give him a chance.
Yeah, give him that chance. And then within the hiring process, you can also, like, they're going to assign you someone and you can get a feel for whether or not they do have enough experience, or even like maybe if they don't have any experience, they have like a barrier with understanding what the needs are that that a client would have, or they would need, like, the nice thing about people with a lot of experience is they know that there's like an urgency with a lot of the tasks that we have. They're familiar with different expectations that are already established previously. So if you slip and don't give them an expectation for hourly work, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, I'm just checking in, like, is this, not always, I want to disclaimer that not always, but a lot of times when somebody has more experience, they're able to jump in and say, is this supposed to take more than 5 hours, or like give you a little bit more feedback. That's the nice thing about hiring somebody with years of experience. However, again, the price point will also set a lot of times the years of experience. So.
Okay. Sounds good. I don't want to monopolize the time, so I thought I'd give other people a chance, but I do want to talk about the back page. So Jason, Melissa, do you have questions?
I have a question now. So just based on the agency versus individual, I go back and forth on my thoughts there. I think what I would truly want is an individual that can really take some ownership in the success of my business and be on the team, not necessarily co-pilot like you were saying, but is really invested in making it work and can work one-on-one and build that relationship. I really like that idea, but what makes me nervous is what happens when they get sick, or if they have young children and their young children get sick, and I have young children and I need them to take care of the business when my young children get sick.
If they quit and now you have to, like,
if they quit, and that's a big concern for me.
So combine that question with a security question. Obviously, if you're working with somebody that is more specific to you, there's a more of a comfort level, but then working with an agency where you might have somebody who's there whenever the other person gets sick, now you're looking at multiple people getting into your accounts and things like that.
So both of those are great questions. And I would say, disclaimer, I don't know all the agencies and I don't know all of their like security measures, but most often they have their own security measures, which is a nice it's nice to have that peace of mind, so that if they have multiple people in your account and something does mess up, they're able to trace that really quickly, and they're able to have insurance on it. They're able to replenish your damages or whatever. That's often built in, and so even if they have multiple people coming in, that's a thing. Hold on, sorry. I just want to also say that the individual, to cover your first question, is often somebody that agency will assign to you. So they'll assign one person that is your main virtual assistant. And a lot of agencies will let you have one person that's your main virtual assistant that's more invested within your company, that you're ongoing that relationship. And then if they get sick or they quit, they'll replace that based on your preferences, and they'll help you build that new relationship a lot of times. But if you go through something like FreeUp, or not FreeUp, sorry, like Upwork, where you're actually hiring one individual, that's where you would get into more of that. Now you've discussed and built a contract with that one individual. That's where you would have more trouble. You might want to have a backup assistant. I think that's kind of a gamble that you take, right? And I have been an individual assistant. I've never worked for an agency before. And so I've worked for 6 or 7 different, CEOs, and I've never really come across that as being an actual problem that they've voiced, but I have heard other people say that is a problem. Every client that I've worked in, I've onboarded the next person, and we've had this really good relationship where I've, completed my tasks on time. So even if you have a sick day, if you're hiring somebody to complete tasks, or they have a sick day or whatever, then they're not necessarily doing a daily, they're not doing your customer service necessarily. Does that answer your question? I think that was a very roundabout answering of your question. But yeah, I would say that you could hire an agency and say, I want an individual, but I want a backup. So if this individual is sick, so that might be your best way to dip your toe in the water at least. And then maybe once you get comfortable with that assistant, or if you decide to go the individual route, you'll already be really familiar with the tasks that you can assign to that new individual that you met on, from a recommendation from someone, which is actually the number one way that I recommend people find a specific individual. There's agencies like, Upwork, but I actually recommend going to your groups, whatever you have as your group, right? Entrepreneurs or something, and asking does anybody have an assistant that they really like? And that's a really good way to just pre-vet them, is because you've already trusted that individual and now they've recommended someone. And that's a good way to find them that we don't really talk about in the websites, but yeah, Megan.
So I feel like everything that you were explaining about, Melissa, everything about kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket with hiring an individual can be pretty scary. And that's a similar experience to what I've come across personally. So I was mentioning that I do virtual and local work with that music therapy practice in Peoria. And I ran into that situation where in February I was sick for basically the entire month and I couldn't really do anything. And so a lot of the projects weren't moving forward, which is what caused me to work with the owner and ask if we can hire a virtual assistant to cover these types of situations. So what I've found is that a lot of the agencies will assign kind of like an account manager. And so if you're piloting the plane, you would have the account manager acting as sort of like a flight attendant supervisor. And so they're working with you. They're on the same journey, same track, and they want to ensure your success. And then they're helping to make sure that all of the tasks are being done by the specific flight attendants that are assigned to your account. So it sort of eliminates the potential for, any project being dropped or tasks not being completed and things like that, because they have that network of people assigned to you. And then as far as Jason's question about security, a lot of the, when I was doing my research, a lot of the agencies and marketplaces and things that I was looking at required their employees to sign non-disclosure agreements and other like confidentiality type documents to ensure there's no liability and to maintain maximum security possible, especially when handling like financial information and other like private information too. So that I thought was one of the really important parts for me when I'm looking for a VA or an agency, is that I want to make sure that all of this information is secure and that it's with people that I trust, that I know, if I'm sick, somebody else is able to handle the task.
And that also, I think, raises a really valid thing too, is that is the difference between going through that agency, like paying the agency versus getting an employee in your company, which is definitely way different. Like you're hiring somebody to be an employee, like to meet with you every week or every day or something, like you're setting those parameters. If it's a 1099, you cannot say like when, like what your expectations are for when you can meet every day or what their availability has to be, because they're a contractor. So there's some red tape that you have to go through with that. But like, that's kind of when you like check your preference. That's definitely something to take into consideration. Like if you want an employee, you're probably going to hire one individual and have like your own non-disclosure agreements that they sign, their own contracts and things. And that does like, that gets a little bit tricky if they do get sick or if they do quit, but that's kind of like the risk of doing the individual.
Mm-hmm.
But there is the pro of them being an employee within your company or an independent contractor that is very invested in there.
Okay, can I ask a clarifying question on that? Because that was also on my list about NDAs. So if we go with a company that already has a non-disclosure agreement for privacy information, are you saying that I don't need to have one individually with that person because their company has one? Is that what you're saying?
I think that it really is up to you. I mean, you could have that double protection. I have had that with clients before, but it's really up to you. I mean, because you could just trust that the company won't release any information or they'll go after the employee, or you could just have it as like a double protection. Usually you would include that in what you're telling them. Like I'd also like my virtual assistant to sign an NDA, or usually they don't let you necessarily sign your own contract. I don't think I found that. But an NDA, I think you can include that within your preferences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was thinking, because some of the stuff I would need for them to manage email lists and stuff like that would give them access to additional information besides their email that they need to ignore. But the fact that they can see it, I would feel comfortable if I had my own NDA with them to say, you're not going to disclose any of the other information that they may see while they're grabbing an email address.
Yeah. And okay, so we don't necessarily cover this within this course, but since we're talking about it, I'll just mention that within the onboarding process, you should have your own policies that they like sign, right? Mm-hmm. The company culture should be in there, but I think there should be stuff that says you will be accessing customer information. You will not be allowed to save this on your personal computer. You can't personally download any of the like everything that you have should be on the company drive or whatever, however you want to finagle that, but that should probably be built in within your onboarding process. So don't really cover that, but I think that's
I wrote it down, so I've got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So following up on that, I definitely see all the benefits to the agency, and that is what I'm more comfortable with. But you all are individuals, and so there's part of me that's like, but truly I want to hire someone like you. I want to support the independent contractors, especially since I am one. What would be the benefits? Could you kind of highlight, I know there's risk, but then what makes it worth the risk?
I would say that there's a lot more. Just personally, just from my personal experience, I definitely get more invested with my client, right? Like we're saying, Jamie is my main client, and I am, they're on daily meetings. We check in every day on video. I'm helping her with her launch goals. A lot of times they'll have their own unique like specialties. So like Megan is like a chief operational officer. Like that's her specialty, is that she knows how to operate the business and the team. And I have specialized in marketing and launches and content creation. And so like those are like my specialties going in. And so they know that about me. And then also Jamie knows all of my previous clients. And she knows like I come with recommendations through like individuals that I've worked with, and like she can go, you know, to her community and say, hey, like, do you know of anybody that specializes in this that could be a virtual assistant? I mean, the price is a little bit going to be probably a little bit higher if you go for an individual that specializes in something that can also do general VA tasks. But I think the pros are that usually they're more experienced, usually they're more committed to it. The communication is a lot of times, I mean, not often, but because they're taking ownership, it's more clear. Like I have to extract a lot of different things from Jamie. Like I don't just like have her, I'm almost like helping with the vision a little bit, which is totally different from just serving the coffee. Like I am doing kind of what the, like I do some of her customer service, but I also do some of the onboarding for the team. I do her finances, and I talk to the accountant. So like there is pros, but at the same time, it's really up to your preferences, because I would almost say that the same pros could exist with an individual that's coming from an agency. It just, yeah, I mean, I think maybe the biggest pro is that usually they're recommended by someone you know and already trust and have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually say a similar thing is like, for example, I'm the COO of that River City Music Therapy, and I was connected to Katie. She's the owner. I was connected to Katie through my fiance. So they're both music therapists, and so they're in like music therapy association community together. And that was how I connected with her. But then, so now I'm sort of like, I'm invested, you know, I mean, we've been friends for a while, and so we have this deep connection. And as the COO, I'm trying to make sure that she stays on track with her vision, and that, you know, every day we're moving closer and closer to her goals. And I like the idea of being able to hire a VA or an agency to help me take care of the smaller tasks that are taking up a lot of my time, so that way I can help her with the larger strategy.
And that's actually raises a good point too. If they are already like an individual independent contractor that have like an LLC or something, a lot of times they are like entrepreneurial themselves, right? And so they've had to, you know, you can connect because you've been an entrepreneur. A lot of times they have more of that vision and strategy, like ideas like going, right? But that could also mean that they're working on their own like business like on the side or something like that. Like I would say that most of the independent contractors that most of my clients have brought on also have like side hustles. And so like, or something that they're really passionate about because they're entrepreneurs that have come in as an independent contractor. So, but like Megan and I, we're so committed to our clients that literally if we make millions of dollars, we still want to work with our clients because we literally love our clients and we love the vision. And so like, that's how invested we are. Like, it's not just a job, but it's like, this is something that I really enjoy doing. Does that make sense? Like, so I guess that's like kind of the pros. You can find somebody really passionate with a lot of ideas and that really connects and bonds and like loves on you. But you could also find that when you hire a project manager or an employee within the company or a COO or something that is like a bigger role, and then have a VA do like the miscellaneous tasks. Or just start with your first hire with a VA.
And just to clarify, your COO role is not a VA role. That is something you do differently. Or are you like performing like a VA as COO because you have those skills?
So
Megan.
I'm performing as the COO. I work mostly virtual because it's all, you know, email and all the typical business admin type things. But then that's why I go maybe once a week or once every other week on site. And so I work with Katie and we do more bigger picture type things. And And so I like my role because it is kind of like a VA, and I can work whenever I want, wherever I want. So I have that flexibility. But then also having the ability to sort of oversee a group of VAs, like through the hiring process. I'm not there with you guys yet because I'm going through day by day, just like you guys are. But being able to manage VAs to help me maintain this role and making sure that everything is getting done.
That's a good differentiation. She is not a virtual assistant for this person. She is a COO with assistant duties as well, because she's the sole employee of the company. And so she is like, whereas I am a virtual assistant to CEO, like that is my role. And even though it does encompass more things, like that would be the differentiation. Like her role is as COO, and it encompasses like assisting, and my role is assisting, and it encompasses like vision and different things as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And are you, if you don't mind me asking, Megan, you're not 1099 in that role as COO? Okay, so you have a full-time employee working virtually.
I actually am only working part-time right now, so it's.
But it's a 10-4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A W-4, sorry.
Because I feel like what I ultimately need is a taskmaster, like person to keep, like I am highly visionary, and so like I need the implementer.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me says like I just need my second half that I'm missing.
Yes.
But I feel like in the hiring process, starting, like I was talking actually to Janie about like, okay, how do I make this first hire? And I don't know if it can be a VA. And she recommended that actually it probably could if you find the right one, possibly like the one that she has that's actually really good at what she does. So that's where like some of the, it's like, okay, find the right one, but what if I get a bad one? And
so I wouldn't let that stop you from making this like small investment in like your first hire. Like this is very low risk to hire a VA versus to like onboard a COO on your company, which is a little higher risk and it's a bigger investment. I would say that if you can follow this course and actually like create tasks to like the first thing you should do is create the task, like understand what you're needing to hand off like as the biggest like stressor for you, like just one task that you can hand off, and you can break it down into a process, and then you can hire that person to take on that, and then you can see if they can take on more and more, like, but it is a process. But I think this as your first hire would be good because you would be able to at least eliminate some things off your plate and be able to focus on the vision and focus on whether or not you want to hire this COO, and then maybe even get more revenue in because of revenue generating activities, because you're able to outsource some of the more stressful things and some of the things that are splitting your focus. Does that make sense? Like there is like, I mean, there's a lot to be said with having an assistant as your first hire. Like when I first started with Jamie, that was over like almost a year and a half ago. And I was kind of her first hire within that role. And I was just doing her emails. That's it at first, right? But because her emails were taking so much of her time and they were splitting her focus, it was a huge investment. It was like a huge offloading of stress for me just to be answering emails. And she had templates for most of the emails. So it was like not a difficult role, but because it was taking so much of her time, it was a huge like alleviation of stress. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Well, yeah. So at first I wasn't doing all of the vision stuff. Like at first I was just answering emails. So that's to be noted as well. Then, did you have one?
Nope, I'm good.
Oh, Jason, anything?
Just before we get off of this, will you hit on, and maybe I missed it, I was looking through emails, but will you hit on what day 3, 4, and 5 will cover?
Yeah, definitely. So
I think part of my personal hiccups in it, and I'm hearing it from a couple other people, is we're filling out a form based on things that we haven't discussed yet, and then we're being asked questions about discussing those. Whereas for me, it's almost, and you know, this is feedback that you're probably looking for after this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great right now.
If you were to spend 5 or 10 minutes at the end of yesterday saying you're going to do this tomorrow, and here's something to think about while you're doing it, then we go through it and then we come back and discuss it. I think that component might help a little bit. So if you could spend a couple minutes just telling us what tomorrow and the next few days are going to touch on.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
great. That's a great feedback. So tomorrow is about the companies that you are actually going to look at for hiring virtual assistants. So we spend the majority of our time just looking at those companies and cross-examining whether they meet your preferences. So like we researched 10 different companies, reached out to them and made sure that we were clear about what preferences they check on your boxes. And so you've now checked all the boxes for your preferences, and you can look at their checklist and say, oh, okay, that meets every preference that I need. Not checks all the boxes, but means all of the preferences that are top for me. And you can like overlay that. And now you decide on the company that you want to go with, or the top 3 companies that you want to go with. And so then the next day is about that hiring process, about sending them the request and asking them more information, or getting really like submitting the request for the virtual assistant, right? And then the next day would be about onboarding that virtual assistant, making sure that they're working for you by the end of that day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like this all like is about getting clear about what you need a virtual assistant to do for you. Because I feel like if you jump in and just hire a virtual assistant and you don't know what tasks you're going to hand to them and what your top task is, then all of a sudden they're going to be overwhelmed, first off, and you're also not necessarily going to hire the right virtual assistant for you because you didn't know what you needed them to do. And so all of this is really important for how to easily outsource that task. A lot of times I see what people do is they first off don't know which company to go for because they don't know what their actual preferences are, and then they end up going with the wrong company that only has like international people that don't speak like clear English, and they only have package plans that are, you know, $700 a month, and that's not at all what they intended to spend or intended to have as a virtual assistant. So like we've helped you get clear step by step for that, and now you can see what companies align with what you need in an assistant. And then when you're applying for the companies on day 4, you are very clear about what you're going to be. A lot of the companies ask you, what are you going to be assigning the assistant? And you're going to say, initially I'm going to be assigning them calendar management and email, like whatever. You're going to say exactly what you want them to take on, and then you're going to actually be able to onboard them way more smoothly and without overwhelm on both ends. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's awesome. And I'm really excited, like, because getting clear is not the fun stuff, right? Like the hiring process is where you're like seeing what your action, I mean, obviously it's where the action's happening, right? But it is necessary to get really clear before you can get really active. Does that make sense? Obviously, I'm really excited about all of it, but I think you're gonna like it. I think that's really great feedback because I'm definitely gonna include that in how we're kind of introducing each day.
I really appreciate you offering that feedback now instead of holding back until the end. So if anybody
if you have any feedback, let us know. This is our first rodeo. We've just dry ran this like a million times internally, but that's definitely different than having people actually walk through it and give us their feedback on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Wow. All right. Thank you for sticking around for 38 minutes and 59 seconds. I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And then tomorrow, when we really get into the nitty gritty of what companies to go for, I'm really hoping that you're really clear and excited about that as well. So we will see you tomorrow. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Good one.